breakfast in bed. I like waking up to the smell of bacon. Sue me. And since I don't have a butler, I have to do it myself.
What is up, everybody? My name is the Austinator, and welcome back to the channel. I know, it's crazy. This is the first time I'm doing a show here on my channel, or literally doing any content. So welcome back. I know it's been a while, and today I figured, I'm in a wrestling mood. I love talking about it. I like to talk about retro wrestling, so I wanted to talk about a company that could have been something big, but just got in their own way in the end, and just all these issues, and that is WCW, but more specifically, Monday Nitro during the Monday Night Wars of 1995 through 2001. Yeah, it was a big time, but at the beginning, you'd be surprised. But I'm not doing this alone because I have my co-host, Shifty. What's up, Shifty?
What's up? It's time to reminisce about where the big boys played.
The big boys play. Literally, you're going to hear that throughout this entire, throughout most of 90, basically throughout the rest of 95 and pretty early on into 96.
It was all about the big boys.
It's about the big boys, like Eric Bischoff would say. Yeah. Man, these first two episodes are really interesting, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But I wanted to get into sort of like how Nitro came about and basically just go through like the backstory. I'm not going to go too in depth with it because, we'd be here all day. But, WCW was founded in 1988 or in the early 80s with Jim Crockett Promotions. Then it ended up becoming its own thing under the NWA. Then there's some financial issues where Ted Turner bought him out in 88, which then that turned to WCW. And a lot of the big talents came through WCW and its partnership with the NWA, more especially like Ric Flair, Sting. Yep. You got guys like Luger in there, the Road Warriors. Like a lot of the bigger names that went to the WWF at the time probably came through WCW. And, we also had Vader come in, in WCW. He had a fantastic run. Jim Herd showed up, which that was a disaster, according to Jim Cornette. Especially when I heard about the Hunchbacks, that was really weird, Mr. Herd. I don't know what the hell you were doing. And then RoboCop. Anyway, so then I think Dusty Rhodes became the booker, but this was around the time where again it wasn't doing very well. So then
you had
Turner,
you had Cowboy Bill Watts that came in and ran it for a while, and his big thing was he didn't want anybody jumping off the top ropes or they would be disqualified, and I think possibly fined. And a lot of people didn't like that. So,
no, WCW was going through a lot of identity crises at the time, and I believe they hired Eric Bischoff in '93 as he became like the VP, I believe, and he was doing a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. And even guys like Brian Pillman and Steve Austin were in WCW before they went to the WWF, like Triple H as well.
They had long runs. Steve Austin and Brian Pillman, they had long runs there. The Hollywood Blondes there for a while. They were tag teams, and both great wrestlers. And,
very good.
And you mentioned Vader made a huge splash in WCW. He was wrestling in Japan and came over here and had that great run as the champ there for a while, and then he mysteriously goes AWOL right here before Nitro starts.
I know, he goes AWOL, which causes Hogan to be torn apart, which we'll talk about in a bit. So Vader was there for a while, and like Vader was awesome back in the day. I mean, his matches with Sting, Foley, and his match with Ric Flair, like a lot, like Vader was just one of those guys that was such a tough SOB, and it's a shame that we never got to see him on Nitro. At least he's in the intro, and that's it.
I didn't even remember he was in that first Nitro intro. I was like, whoa, that's Vader there, because Luger replaced him later on in that scene there, and
it's Vader was there in the intro, but again, we'll talk about that a little bit more as we talk about the shows. So WCW was Bischoff comes in 93. Then a year later, well, during 92, 93, they split from the NWA. And this is when they had the two belts. They had the WCW belt, which was like I call it the globe belt because that's basically what it was. It was just like this. It had a globe in the middle with the WCW logo, and then you have the international belt, which was technically the NWA belt, the big gold belt.
And of course, Ric Flair brought that one over to WWF at the time for a little bit.
He did.
And of course WCW sued them and was like, you can't put that on the air. So, they had to, that didn't last too long.
They had to digitize the belt from what I remember.
Yeah.
And technically Rick Rude, was a multiple time world champion in WCW because of that international belt, which was technically the NWA title, but we're not going to go into hypotheticals, but they were unified because, Hulk Hogan was coming in 1994, which is a big key signing here because Hulk Hogan's going to be all over these shows for the next 4 years, or at least basically until 2000. And then we'll talk about it when we get to it. But Hogan comes in, he beats Flair in 94 for the belt. He's basically been champion throughout all this time. He's held it for over a year. As the champion. He's feuded with Vader, Flair. He's currently in a feud with the Dungeon of Doom, which we'll talk about. Then Savage came in 94 as well. So you got your two big signings right there. And this was the same year where Hulk Hogan main evented Starrcade with Brutus the Barber Beefcake. Yes. I said that. That was your main event of Starrcade in 1994. The more you know. Maybe you didn't want to know.
I swear, Hogan has helped Bruti's career out more than anybody in the business. He started with them, and then any big spot he's ever had is thanks to Hulk Hogan.
Oh yeah. Oh man, that was just stupid. So around this time when they brought in Hogan, Savage, Ted Turner asked Eric Bischoff, this is from what Eric Bischoff, what other sources have said, is, how can we compete with the WWF? And Eric Bischoff said, well, how about we do a show on Mondays, a primetime show on Mondays? And then Ted Turner was like, that's a great idea, pal. Even though he probably doesn't sound like that. He definitely did not sound like Vince McMahon. So he decided to have a wrestling show on Monday because around this time they had WCW Saturday night and they had Main Event and they had all their other shows. But this show was going to be live on Monday around the same time as Raw, which was a big deal at the time because nobody did that.
Yeah. I wasn't too hyped on the idea when I first heard about it because I was so used to having their main show every Saturday night at 6:05, and it would last 2 hours. And, that was a big deal, for ages and ages. And, I was like, what does that mean? We're going to have to flip between the two when the Nitro starts? And but we quickly learned to get in the groove of watching two wrestling programs at once Nitro started up, and it was pretty fun.
I heard it was really fun, and getting the chance to look, I've seen the first couple episodes of Nitro. I kind of stopped at Halloween Havoc because I got busy, but wanted to do these reviews. I've always wanted to do them because WCW Monday Nitro is a really interesting brand and company as a whole during this time because it starts out like 95 is such a weird year. It's 1995 as a whole. It was just a bad year for wrestling all around.
Oh, it was terrible.
And I know everybody's like, oh, the Monday Night Wars, rejuvenated the ratings. I'm like, not until 96. Because if you actually look at the ratings in late 95, even Nitro's ratings weren't that great.
Yeah, WWF was in a sorry state because people were behind Brett and they wanted to push Diesel at the time. Brett wanted to take some time off, and it was just a terrible year. Just bad there, and they were pushing guys like Mabel, who wasn't ready. I mean, he had the size, but he wasn't ready for a main event, push against Diesel, and that was just a bad summer. And when Nitro came around, it was actually a bright spot because WWF was so bad at the time. Well, it was bad up until Survivor Series because, of course, Diesel and Bret Hart had their great match at Survivor Series there in November. I guess the WWE saw that, WCW was really making a push towards taking them out, and they had to put out on a class act match at Survivor Series and put the belt back on Bret. But, it didn't help them too much because WCW really took it to them there in '96.
And they dominated for quite a good time during 96, 97. So,
oh yeah.
But before we get to that, we have to talk about the beginnings of Nitro, the early beginnings in 95, because when you see wrestling in 1995 compared to like 96, 97, it was a completely different ball game compared to what it became later down the road with the NWO and such. So,
well, there are some things you can see in these first couple episodes that are shades of what becomes the NWO, because there's a lot of run-ins. There's a lot of run-ins, and what we used to call in WWE gang warfare, where they would have the different factions go up against each other. We'll see the Dungeon of Doom get into some hijinks here in these first two episodes, and that's shades of what the NWO became known for, is doing run-ins every other match, and that lasted for a while, but it got kind of old. But that's way down the line.
That is true, and I figured we'll start in 1995, and we're of course going to start off with the first episode of WCW Monday Nitro, which is on September.
WCW Monday Nitro, episode 1, the Pasta Menace.
Yes, episode 1, PASTAMANIA, the Hulkaroos and Hulkios. This ran like uncontested on September 4th, 1995. The rating for the show was a 2.5. That was your early ratings, which again, compared to where they were in what the ratings they will end up getting, it's kind of low. But again,
kind of low, but better than I think what is Raw currently pulling nowadays? A 1 something.
Probably. So yeah, you're probably right. It was doing a lot better, but this was a different time. So
yes.
It was actually held in the Mall of America in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm gonna put in the Mall of America specifically because there's a promo later on in the show that we'll talk about. The commentary team.
That was a great setting, though. That was a very unique setting, and for a first time, for the first episode, you want to have it in some unique venue, and I'm surprised they didn't go back. That was just a really great. I guess they didn't want somebody hanging over like the balconies up top and falling into the ring or something.
Oh, sure.
It was like 4 stories, that mall.
It's something like that, yeah.
Crazy.
Very crazy. Your commentary team for Nitro in 1995, which I believe is going to be all throughout, unless something changes, is Eric Bischoff, Steve Mongo McMichael, and Bobby the Brain Heenan. Shifty, before we get into like the matches and the show itself, what did you think of this commentary team as a whole? Did it work for you, or was it just too much going on? Did they just not gel?
I think it was pretty decent for the time. I was surprised they got Mongo on the broadcast team because he had just appeared in WWF a few months back as one of Lawrence Taylor's I don't know what to call them, the backups for his match with Bam Bam Bigelow, and all of a sudden he goes to the competition. And this is before I think he had the dog. I didn't see the dog there. He had a little Chihuahua there
Yes.
for. Yeah, he didn't have it at this first episode, but
I
yeah,
thought he
he's.
did, unless maybe I just didn't notice.
I don't know. I didn't notice. I didn't notice. But yeah, I remember the Chihuahua became the centerpiece of the broadcast table there for a while there, before he left and joined the Horsemen. Yeah, I thought he was pretty entertaining. The banter between him and Bobby Heenan was great. I don't care for Bischoff on the mic. I think the Nitro became much better when he stepped away once the NWO formed and Tony Schiavone filled that seat. But Mongo and Brain are great.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the commentary team was fine. I will admit it was very weird not hearing Tony Schiavone's like voice, because you think when you think of WCW like announced team, you think Tony Schiavone, and not
Yeah.
hearing him on Nitro is a bit strange. And especially like with Mongo McMichael there, like I agree he was very entertaining, and Bischoff was fine. Like he was just there to kind of just, I guess, move the storylines along and all that fun stuff.
I'd
Bobby,
I'd say the broadcast team was a lot better than what Raw started out with. They had Rob Bartlett up there, and
oh yeah, God,
who was
I
Rob
think
Bartlett?
I don't know. I think he was, because I know Vince McMahon was on commentary for Raw. I think Savage was a commentator.
It was him, Savage, and McMahon, and then Heenan replaced Bartlett later on when they finally realized that Bartlett sucked.
God, yeah, but I will say that the commentary team here, it was fine. It worked for what it was. So before we start, I also want to talk about the intro. The intro to Monday Night Nitro is just iconic. I mean,
Oh yeah,
like you have the buildings, the fires, and then you got like Hogan, like yelling as he's like tearing off his shirt and hitting the leg drop, like all these explosions, and it was so cool. And the music is very 90s.
and you got that clip of Vader in there for that one episode.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to look up and see what the hell Vader, because basically, just a spoiler alert, they basically say that Vader's MIA after during the following week.
Bischoff bragged for years that he fired Vader, so I guess he just let him go. And it might have been a trade deal with New Japan, because he returned to New Japan after his stint with WCW, I'm pretty sure, and Scott Norton came over, so it might have been a trade deal with New Japan for those two.
So I'm seeing here that Vader was fired because he was involved in a locker room fight with Paul Orndorff.
Oh, really?
Yeah, That's what it says. Again, that's very weird.
Yeah, I don't remember that. Of course, this was before the time of like national dirt sheets, or the internet and stuff. So we didn't really hear about behind the scenes stuff.
And fun fact, apparently he was supposed to face Hulk Hogan for the WCW belt the following week after the first episode, and not Luger.
Huh.
So yeah, that's a little fun fact for you.
So how would that have affected War Games? I mean,
I'm guessing it would have just been the same thing as what was going on with Luger. With Savage comes out and goes, "Well, I can't trust you, Vader," and then Sting is like, I don't know, but then that doesn't make sense, because like Sting and Vader don't like each other, so then Sting would then have to come to his aid to be like, "No, Vader's cool," and then Hogan's like, "I'm torn apart,
yeah.
brother."
I mean, Savage should have been on Luger's side because they were just in WWF, and I mean, unless he was still on you almost sold out to the $1 Million Man, but it was Tatanka, but I still don't like you anyway.
But yeah, God, there's a lot of questions that are going to be answered here later on with that. But I think that's another thing I like about these first two episodes is they set up like the main feuds going into like the pay-per-view and so on and so forth. Like they at least are establishing the conflict between Savage and Luger here, because they're going to be feuding basically for the next couple of months. So I like that they're setting that up here. We're going to be talking about a couple other programs that are going to be going into Fall Brawl 95, War Games. I got to add in the War Games asterisk on there because that's the tagline. So we kick off the show with Jushin Thunder Liger and Brian Pillman. That was the first match on Nitro, by the way, everyone. So very fun fact.
It's a rematch they fought a couple years prior to that.
I did hear about that. I actually took a lot of bullet points. Like, I just took a lot of the key moments from the match. I'm going to read them off here, and then we'll just kind of talk about it. There was a nice chain wrestling in the beginning. Liger would end up taking control early on with a big kick in the corner and a nice standing moonsault. Although I did notice that Pillman just stood there for like a good couple of seconds. Like, it almost felt like that he was kind of just getting like, he was setting himself up for the moonsault, which that kind of was like a weird thing for me, but it wasn't too bad. Pillman would end up taking back control with a couple head scissors and Hurricane Rounders, one of which did look a little awkward. Like, it wasn't clean, but it didn't really ruin it for me. If there's a few rest holds here and there, and then Liger would end up blocking in a surfboard, which the crowd popped for, by the way. Like, that was a very, huge pop. And then he ends up hitting a cannonball from the apron to the floor, which then Pillman would end up coming back and hitting a nice crossbody from the top rope, which, onto the outside. Jushin Thunder Liger would then, end up hitting a top rope superplex later on in the match. Pillman would end up countering a top rope move with a drop kick, which then Liger would then hit a power bomb. Liger would end up hitting a top rope Hurricane Rana for a 2. A lot of top rope stuff. Pillman would then hit a tornado DDT. And then there was a couple of German suplex counter exchanges, which would lead to a victory roll win for Flying Brian, which then after the match, you get a nice you get a nice handshake, a nice arm raise, like great sportsmanship from both men. It was a fun match. I liked it.
That set the tone for what Nitro would become, as, showcasing the cruiserweights. And those were the two top guys of that time. Like I said, they had a great match a couple years before on a pay-per-view. I don't know exactly, can't remember exactly which one it was, but those two were just top class guys back then.
Very top class. I mean, both guys are great at what they do. It wasn't the cleanest match. There were a couple mess ups here and there, but again, it didn't take me out of the match. It was very fun.
You got to consider there was probably like I don't know how good Jushin Thunder Liger was at speaking English, so there was probably a disconnect there.
Oh sure. It was a fun match, like, because when you're comparing it to like stuff that was happening on Raw at the time, which a lot of the matches back then were like squash matches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like WCW kind of established early on that there's a lot of like great wrestling early on, and it was fun. It was fast paced. It was you had a lot of high flying stuff from both. It was fun. You had a good opener for your start of the show. I'm gonna give it a B+. I thought it was good. It's nothing that's gonna set the world on fire. Like it's not like, oh my god, this was the best match you'll ever see. But it was a very fun key match that you would want to have to start off your show.
Yeah, definitely.
And I don't know if they had the Cruiserweight title at the time, but if they did, they really should have built the Cruiserweight title around guys like Thunder Liger and Brian Pillman.
Yeah, I don't think they did. I don't think they did.
Well, now I got to do research here because didn't they not have the Cruiserweight title at this time?
I don't remember. I mean, I know. I remember. Well, I just remember the TV title being the only other title besides the U.S. and World back then.
Oh, actually, no. The WCW belt the Cruiserweight title came in 1996.
Okay.
So the year after, which that kind of adds up. But I always thought that was very weird because I know that they had the TV title at the time with the world title, U.S. tag belts, but I always thought they would have had the Cruiserweight belt, but I guess they didn't bring that in until much later. So
yeah, that makes sense because they brought in all the Lucha Libre guys that year. So
yeah, but I would say overall it was a fun match. I liked it.
Yep, Not as fun as the next segment.
Well, there's a couple segments here. First, you get a pre-tape promo from WCW US champion Sting on Ric Flair because they're going to be wrestling in the next match. But it's just a generic promo where Sting's like, oh, Ric Flair, I'm going to lock you in the Scorpion Death Lock and beat you around the Mall of America. Like, it's just basic stuff, nothing crazy. But then we get a promo from Hulk Hogan, the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, inside the Mall of America, pre-taped again, outside the PASTAMANIA restaurant, inside the Mall of America. Now, for those of you listening, malls back in the day were special, right? Like they weren't common. So this tracks a little bit. A Hulk Hogan pasta restaurant inside a mall. You can't make it up.
No. Yeah, but some big time restaurants started off as little corner of the mall eateries. Like I remember back in the the late '80s, there was this little place called Chick-fil-A. I don't know if you heard of it, and
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it was a mostly you would only find it in like corner of the mall, hidden in the back, a little chicken place, and it's become one of the top restaurant chains here today. But sadly, that didn't work out too good for PASTAMANIA. Actually, I wonder if those became the Mean Gene cheeseburger places that he had for a while, because I think they were all under ownership of like Turner or whatever. So it might have switched over to Mean Gene if after all these other malls are like, no, we don't want a pasta place.
Yeah, because like a pasta restaurant, like in theory, that's not a bad idea, but a pasta
Olive Garden.
restaurant, yeah, but
PASTAMANIA is Olive Garden.
No, it was supposed to be like fast food, I would think. Like
they didn't even show the food.
No, but Hogan was talking about it. He was like Hulkaroos and Hulkios. I was like, what the fuck is he talking about? Like
that's a spicy meatball.
Like Hogan was just gelling shit in this promo. Like some of it was so nonsensical, but yet you kind of want to listen to everything he's saying because of how batshit crazy he is. Like,
was this before or after he passed on the Foreman grill?
I think this. Hold up. Now I got it. Wait. Hold up. So Hulk Hogan, Foreman grill. Hold on.
This might be what he chose to do instead of the Foreman grill.
So apparently, when did this happen? So in the mid '90s, it was the popularity. Yeah, I would guess it'd be back in the 1990s. He didn't. Yeah, apparently he had two sponsors, which was a meat maker and a grilling machine, and then he went for the meat maker.
The meat maker.
God. So Eric Bischoff's trying to get an interview with Hulk Hogan outside the PASTAMANIA restaurant. Hulk Hogan starts out by saying, "Who's the greatest wrestler of them all?" And everyone goes, "Hulk Hogan." Now, there's a podcast I listened to called Deadlock Deadlock Pod. They reviewed this first episode, and they had a running joke during this segment where like one of the kids was like Macho Man, and then fucking like Hogan starts losing his shit, and he's like, "Take away his sidebread, dude." It's so fucking bizarre. So Hogan's like, he's like, "For the first time on TNT, dude, I'm gonna put my WCW World Title on the line, Jack, against Big Bubba." And he's like talking about how he eats like pasta and like he's got pasta on the brain and how he's gonna beat up Big Bubba and he's gonna like this shit is just it's so
he didn't eat enough pasta because that was the period where he had just got off the steroids because of steroid trial, and he was super skinny. He needed to eat a lot more pasta during that time.
Yeah, he did, but he did look very trim though, which I'll give him that. He didn't look too bad. So Hogan's like talking about PASTAMANIA, and then he's like, "What you gonna do, brother?" Like, it's just a typical Hulk Hogan promo, but just being outside a PASTAMANIA restaurant in the Mall of America in a PASTAMANIA shirt, it is so weird, but yet it's so entertaining because of how weird it is. Like,
Yeah, I just think after they finished that little promo, everybody was like, "Okay, let's all head over to A&W."
yeah, pretty much. I wouldn't be surprised about that, to be honest. So we go from that to the WCW United States Championship match, which was Sting, the champion, defending against the Nature Boy, Ric Flair.
First Nitro and last Nitro, those two's fault.
First Nitro, last Nitro. You are completely right, but one was for a belt and one wasn't.
Yep.
So before we get into the match, because of this match, realistically, if you've seen a Sting and Ric Flair match before, you've seen them all, realistically.
Yeah.
Because this really wasn't any different. I got the notes, but really this match is most notable for the return of Lex Luger, the total package.
Which was a huge moment.
Very huge. Yeah.
Because I remember I guess I was 15 at that time, and I was watching it, and he showed up, and I was like, wait a second, because he had just wrestled in WWF, not on TV, but 2 days earlier, and he had been on the last Monday Night Raw, and I was like, how could this happen? How could this be? But he was there, and it was like the first time that's the first time anything like that has happened, really. I mean, you didn't have 2 live shows like that, no. Raw was taped, but him just showing up there out the blue, and I think Rick Rude was the first person to show up on both shows at the same night, but I think Luger was in some sort of commercial on Raw you said Raw wasn't on that night.
No,
what was it, a dog show or something? They usually,
I think so, yeah.
It was one of the two. They usually took off for tennis or dogs, but yeah, that would have been weird if he had showed up on both shows.
That is true. But regardless, though, and I agree, it is like one of those first moments of wrestling where it's like, holy shit, because Luger wrestled a house show from what I'm to understand the night before, and then nobody knew he was coming in. And what's even weird, more interesting is Eric Bischoff didn't even want Lex Luger.
Oh no,
he wasn't
way less money. He didn't want him because he didn't like him. And Sting was like, no, go give him a chance, And he lowballed him. And Luger was like, yeah, I'll do that, because he wanted out of the WWF because they I don't want to say they screwed him over because Brett was more popular than he was, but they should have at least put the belt on him once during that run, and maybe would want to stay. But WWF just kind of, they could have did better with him.
Yeah, because it's one of those things where it's one of those big what ifs. I think the biggest thing that the WWF did wrong with Lex Luger is trying to make him into the next Hulk Hogan.
They should have put that belt on him at SummerSlam '93. And the Steiners and Tatanka celebrating like they did, and Savage was in there too, celebrating like they did over a count-out victory. That's where people, you spent all those months saying, Luger's the man, he's going to beat Yoko, he's going to take the title, all that, and just giant wet fart. It was, what the hell?
I know we're kind of deviating away from Nitro, but my biggest question is, what the fuck were they so scared of to not put the belt on him? Was it just because nobody was interested in Lex Luger? Was it just because Vince McMahon started to realize, maybe this is
I think it was long-term booking. They wanted to do something with him at WrestleMania, but Brett was just too popular, and I think from what I understand, they went with Brett at the last minute at WrestleMania, and I don't know. It's just it's a huge missed opportunity. They should have put that belt on him at SummerSlam.
Yeah, and there were even rumors like they were gonna have Luger win the belt from Yokozuna at WrestleMania, but then have him drop it to Bret Hart. But then it's just so like weird. Like I really like. I just wish that they didn't try to make him do this patriotic like character and just kept him as Lex Luger. You know, like not the narcissist, just Lex Luger.
They could have did so many things. They could have done that. They could have had Brett win the belt, and then Luger come out and celebrate with him, and then attack him after the match, and then sets up like some for King of the Ring. There were so many ways they could have went with that, but then after Brett won the belt, Luger just fell to the wayside. He tagged up with Davey Boy Smith for a while, and then he feuded with Tatanka. It was just they wasted him.
Now, let me ask you this: if Lex Luger stayed and didn't go back to WCW, do you think Luger would have became world champion, or do you think that Vince would have kept him as just an upper mid card guy?
That's tough to say. I don't know because Diesel was there, Shawn was there. He may not have been on in with the Click, so I think he would have just. I think he would have been held back, and I think he saw the writing on the wall that he needed to get out. Of course, the Click came over. Half the Click came over.
Yeah, with Scott calling Kevin Nash, which, again, I like Kevin Nash, but let's be real, his world title run in 95 was not.
Yeah. But I'm sure Luger was friends with Nash and
sure.
Because they were all in WCW. Well, I don't know. No, because Luger was gone in '92. He was in WWF, so I don't know if they were actually real good friends at that time. Until he went to WWF, because like I said, Luger was in WWF in '92, and Hall and Nash were in WCW in '92. So
yeah, it's really weird with Lex Luger, and seeing him come out like everybody's like, oh my god, Lex Luger, like. It really goes so. Like, I know a lot of people, like, again, I understand that, yes, Lex Luger may not have been the greatest wrestler in the world, but the guy was hot as hell, man. He was over. Like,
yeah. Well, I choose those words better. But, yeah, he was over.
Well, what I mean is, like, guys, hot in wrestling means, like, you were, like, popular with the crowd. Like,
yes.
But without wrestling jargon, he was popular. Contrary to popular belief, he had a great physique. He wasn't the best wrestler, but he could at least go.
And they brought him in straight out the gates. I think with him feuding with the Horsemen and joining the Fort. He was a Horseman at one time, wasn't he? I mean,
that was before, yes.
Yeah, that was before my time. I never really went back and watched everything from that era. I need to at some point, but. Yeah, I mean, they pushed him really hard when he came in, and he just. I mean, I even liked his run before he left WCW, where he was champ there for a little bit, but WCW knew what to do with him. WWF didn't.
Yeah, and when we talk a little bit more about the year of 1995, I feel like if there was a time to put the world title on Lex Luger, I think the best time to do it would have been in 95, where he first came back. Like, I know that, they're in the middle of the Hogan, Legion of Doom stuff, and I know the Giant was going to come in. And I know at this point they probably did promise Randy Savage the belt because, he just came in. But you brought Lex Luger in. The guy was popular. You had him go face-to-face with Hulk Hogan. What was stopping them from having, like, again, this is something that has plagued WCW, and this is a big problem, is like they have these big matches. They have the chance to do them on the biggest show you could, but they never execute it. Like, I think in a perfect reality, Hogan would have faced Luger at Starrcade, and then maybe Luger wins via shenanigans and becomes the champion.
Too many egos.
Unfortunately, that's just another thing that plagued WCW in the end, was just too many egos.
And
the politics.
What you were saying about Hogan and Beefcake was it Starrcade '94?
Yes.
Why wasn't that Hogan and Savage? I mean, why Beefcake?
I don't know. Like, I mean, I understand it wouldn't make a lot of sense because, you want Savage to be a good guy, but like, you couldn't have done Hogan Vader at that show.
Yeah.
Like, again, I'm not trying to disrespect Brutus Beefcake Ed Leslie, but like, really, he main evented Starrcade. Debatably, WCW's WrestleMania. Ugh.
I don't know. Things were messed up back then.
They were really messed up.
Speaking of messed up, Arn Anderson feuding with Ric Flair. I did not remember this. I had blocked it from my memory somehow.
I'm actually gonna get to that because I do want to get through my notes. So Luger comes out, and by the way, when Sting comes out, he gets a massive pop. Like he was really, really popular at the time. But anyway, here I'm literally gonna lay this out here, and this is gonna be the foundation, right? This is basically every Sting Ric Flair match. And Shifty, I want you to I want you to know, I want you to be like if I'm completely wrong or not. So the match starts out, you get like a couple of headlocks, here and there. Sting ends up taking a shoulder block from Ric Flair. You'd think Sting would be the one that overpowers him, but then he ends up getting up and hitting this huge body slam, and then hits him again with one. Then he drop kicks him, which then Flair's like, he goes the outside, comes back in, he pokes Sting in the eyes and he chops him a few times, but then Sting no sells eventually. So then he ends up hitting Flair with a third body slam. Yeah, seriously, hits him with. There's another one later on in the match. Just want to let everybody know. But this was something that was very interesting. Flair ends up doing a cross body, which would end up sending Sting to the outside of the ring. He brings it. Well, they fight on the outside a bit, and then Sting ends up lifting Ric Flair over his head, throws him back in the ring, which I thought was pretty cool. Sting ends up going for the stinger splash in the corner, but Flair moves out of the way, but Sting stops himself and hits Flair with a bulldog. But then Ric Flair hits him with a back elbow, taking back control, which then Flair goes to the top rope. And of course, Ric Flair going to the top rope means he's going to get thrown off. So
yep,
that's just history. You can't, if Ric Flair goes to the top rope, don't even bother being surprised that he gets thrown off, because that's every match. So he gets hit with a fourth body slam, and then Sting goes for the top rope splash. He ends up missing. Arn Anderson comes out as they're having the match. Ric Flair ends up hitting him with a stalling suplex, but then Sting ends up no-selling the suplex because, of course, he did. Ric Flair takes a few clotheslines. He does the 10 punches in the corner. A lot of counters here and there with some pin exchanges. Sting would then go for the top, ends up hitting the top rope superplex. Flair then takes out Sting's leg with a chop block after Sting sees Arn Anderson. Flair ends up blocking in the figure four, but then Arn Anderson gets in the ring and brawls with Ric Flair as the referee calls the disqualification and considers it a no contest, basically meaning that Sting retains the U.S. title. And then just as when you think Arn Anderson's going to fight Sting, he ends up just taking his leather jacket and leaving. I mean, it was a Sting-Ric Flair match. I mean, yeah. It was good. It was good. I just think the finish was just very hollow, but I get it. They wanted to set up the Arn Anderson Ric Flair match at the pay-per-view, which I'll even talk about here. Yeah, I didn't even know that Arn Anderson feuded with Ric Flair. Like, I would kind of figure they would have done it at some point, but I never knew they did it in 95.
I don't remember it at all.
Because I know they had the match at Fall Brawl, and I do remember that at Halloween Havoc they do the whole swerve thing where Flair's teaming with Sting, but then he ends up turning on Sting and reveal that it's a ruse all along, and brings back the Four Horsemen. But I forgot they actually not only had a feud, but had a one-on-one pay-per-view match. Like, yeah. It's really weird. It was very weird. I gave the match a B as a whole. I mean, it's nothing to write home about. It's Sting, Ric Flair. It's good for what it was. But
I'm actually looking forward to the Flair Arn Anderson match at the. We're going to watch the Fall Brawl pay-per-view this week, and I didn't remember them having a feud, so this is going to be an interesting match for me. I think that's probably the biggest match I'm looking forward to this pay-per-view.
It's going to be very interesting going into Fall Brawl 95 War Games. So then after the match, we got Scott Norton coming out. He's making his debut. He's confronting Steve Mongo McMichael, and Eric Bischoff's like, "Get out of here! Get out of here!" and then Randy Savage comes out. He's like, "You want to fight me? Oh yeah, let's fight me. I'm gonna step into it." And then they fight, and then like Savage is in the ring, and like he's moving around, he's laying down in the ring, and he's like flipping out that Eric Bischoff's like, get out of here, you're never gonna wrestle anywhere in North America again or something. Like, I'm like, oh god. But I was like, okay, it was a very interesting like debut here. I mean, it sets up the next week match with Scott Norton and Randy Savage, which we'll talk about here.
Worst finish ever.
It was a very interesting finish, which we'll talk about. But I want to get your thoughts, Shifty. What are your thoughts on Scott Norton? Did you know of him before he came in, or like, what do you think of him now? Because I know he worked in Japan and he was big.
Yeah, I never had heard of him because unless you traded tapes, you really didn't know about Japanese wrestling back then here in the States for the most part. But I became a pretty big fan of him. I think he had a tag team match, a tag team with another fellow there before he joined the NWO. Another stout dude, black dude. He was Thunder and Lightning. I don't remember the name of their tag team, but dude was scary. I mean, if you asked me back then, who was a wrestler you did not want to cross paths with, in that dark alley? That guy, because he was just solidly built, and he always looked angry. I mean, he always looked pissed off, and that guy, tough mofo.
He really was, like, and especially as you see in his match with Randy Savage the following week, like the guy was a shit brick house. Like, he was a physical specimen.
And he was all about the strong style in Japan. I haven't seen him wrestle in Japan, but I can just imagine him throwing chops with some of those Japanese guys. And I actually want to go back and see that. I think he wrestled against or with Vader there for a bit. I don't know. I've just seen clips, but I haven't actually watched him. I need to go back and check it out.
Yeah, it was a very. He was really cool. He was very tough, physical, and then he ends up facing Randy Savage the following week. Then we got a hype package for Sabu, which again another very, very interesting. Because I knew that Sabu was gone from ECW during this time, but I forgot he had a stint in WCW, which I kind of already figured that it probably goes nowhere because he ends up going back to ECW. But I'm not really going to touch on it because of course he has a match the following week. But very interesting, I will say, very interesting. Then Mean Gene comes out after the break. He announces the WCW Harley-Davidson winner.
Mike Hill won a.
Mike Hill.
Congratulations, Mike.
Now, what did he win? I don't remember, but congratulations.
It was some sort of motorcycle. I would think
so. Yeah. Then after that, Eric Bischoff will then announce some matches for WCW Saturday Night, which would consist of Johnny B. Bad taking on one half the tag champs, Dirty Dick Slater, and Macho Man and Sting teaming up against the Blue Bloods.
Dirty Dick Slater.
Very, very interesting card for WCW Saturday Night. Thank you, Mr. Bischoff. And then following this, we got another debut here. We got another hype package for VK Wall Street, aka IRS.
Yes.
During this promo, he's literally just like, "Yeah, the new generation sucked." Like,
well, he's introduces Michael Wall Street, and next week they rename him VK Wall Street, Vincent Kennedy Wall Street.
VK Wall Street, and he was like, the new generation sucks because it was the few generation.
Yep.
And he wasn't necessarily wrong. Which then we end up seeing VK Wall Street the following week, because we're getting into our main event for the first episode of Nitro, and that is for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. Hulk Hogan defending against Big Bubba, a.k.a. the Big Boss Man.
I was so bummed when he left WWF and went back to his old persona of Big Bubba. The Big Boss Man was like one of my favorites in the WWF. And, he debuted in WCW as the Boss and he was wearing the black uniform. But WWF said, "Don't do that. That's too close to the Big Boss Man. You gotta cut that shit out." So he went back to Big Bubba Rogers.
Yeah, and actually what's really funny is in 94 Bash at the Beach, he actually wrestled Vader in a match that wasn't half bad. So,
Yep. He was a great wrestler.
Yeah, he very good. But it's really like the thing that screamed WCW back then, and the fact this main event of the first Nitro, Big Bubba and Hulk Hogan.
I'm totally forgetting about his short stint as the Guardian Angel after the Boss. He became the Guardian Angel, and then he became Big Bubba Rogers again.
That is very true. This, I mean, again, Hogan came out to a nice pop, even though back in 95, Hogan's popularity was really dwindling. But he got a nice pop here in the Mall of America. Again, the match itself, if you've seen a Hulk Hogan match, kind of like Ric Flair, no disrespect to them, but realistically, if you've seen a Hulk Hogan match, you kind of seen them all for the most part. I mean, Hogan basically, he's overpowering Big Bubba in the early going. He does the flexes. Big Bubba then hits some strikes in the corner splash, but then Hogan ends up coming in and smashing him into the ring corner. But then Bubba, because he's a heel, he's got to poke Hogan in the eye. Bubba then hits him with a nice backbreaker, but then Hogan ends up, countering with the 2 boots in the corner. Then Big Bubba ends up making a brief comeback here, but then he tries to go after Jimmy Hart, which then Hogan starts attacking him and choking him with the shirt. And then just lots of strikes and some corner moves. Hogan hits the body slam for 3 elbow drops, which then Bubba hits him with a body slam. He ends up missing the corner splash, but then hits Hogan with the Boss Man Slam. I know it's called the side slam, but it's the Boss Man Slam to me, so sue me. Hogan then, kicks out of the big Boss Man Slam. He hulks up, and then he does the punches, the leg drop, the boot. That's the 3. Hogan retains, and then the Dungeon of Doom come out because this was the big feud in 95, Hulk Hogan versus the Dungeon of Doom. And then Luger ends up coming out to help Hulk Hogan, which then, he bumps into Hogan, and then there's, this big stare down with them, and then Eric Bischoff's like, we gotta take a break, but don't miss it. And then we get some nice Fall Brawl advertising with Hulk Hogan, Vader, Macho Man, and Sting. Again, Vader's not here anymore, but he's still in the marketing. This is for MDA. I believe this is the Muscular Dystrophy Association. Dystrophy. Yeah. Dystrophy. Okay, so the Muscular Dystrophy Association. You're gonna see this again in the following week, but they come back from the break, and then Mean Gene's like, "Whoa, we need to get some things figured out here." And Hogan's like, "Luger, go away, brother. We don't need you, dude. I'm the champion, Jack. Get out, Luger." And then Luger's like, "No, listen, I want to come here because this is where the big boys play. I hate, working with children." And he's like, "I came back because there's only one real world champion, and that's you, Hogan." He's like, I don't care when I got to face it, but I want to face you for that belt." And then Hogan's like, "This is my belt, dude. If you want it back with me, give me your stinky hand and shake my other stinky hand. And I'll put the belt against you next week." And then Luger shakes his hand, and then that was the end of the show, basically, because then it just turns into the commentary team. Yeah, I mean, it was good. I mean, I'll give the match itself a C+, because realistically, if you really think about it, it wasn't a bad match, but it was just very
It was Hulk Hogan light. I mean, he without the steroids and the cocaine, he just wasn't, the same Hulk Hogan.
No. And especially in 95, where Hogan was kind of just I just think the Hogan persona was really starting to get to a point of repetitive.
And he didn't care.
No.
I mean, in a couple more months, he's going to shave off his mustache for 3 ninjas. So,
That is true. And then we get Dark Side Hulk Hogan, which we'll talk about a little bit once we get to that. But yeah, no, the show was, enjoyable. It sets up stuff for next week. It also sets up some long-term stuff. I mean, I thought for a debut episode, it was pretty successful.
Yeah, it was a good first episode. I think, I don't know. I like I said, Hogan was a little bit stale at the time, but it really showcased like the WCW strong suits, like the cruiserweights, what they had of the cruiserweight division at the time, and you had Scott Norton debuting, and he was a fixture on that show in that company for many years. It was a good first episode.
Yeah, it's what it was. I mean,
yeah, that's what it was.
I mean, is it anything like if we got this today, would it be the most impressive? No. But for history's sake, and plus, you had some really good matches here. It was good.
Yeah.
It was nothing. It was good. It's all it's all it needed to be.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I liked it. So we get to our following week's Nitro, which is on September 11th, 1995, which is coincidentally the same day as my birthday.
Wait, what day was that? Did you say?
September 11th, 1995.
Well, a happy early birthday.
Thank you.
Yes, and my birthday is on the 14th.
Oh, wow. Well, then happy early birthday then.
Well, thank you.
No problem. So this other episode of Nitro took place in Miami, Florida. Same commentary team as last week with Eric Bischoff, Steve McMichael, and Bobby Heenan. This is the first time Monday Night Raw and Nitro actually competed against each other, and the ratings here was Nitro did a 2.4 and Raw did a 2.5.
Ooh, neck and neck.
Very neck and neck, but Raw slightly, just barely edged it out, though. But
this was also another weird arena because the entrance was like 3 feet away from the ring.
It was, yeah. But can I also say though, too, the Nitro stage and setup, I thought that was very cool. Was you don't have the very fancy Titantrons at this time. It was very just. You had the WCW logo. You had some steel beams around it.
Yeah, I honestly, one of the things I don't like about modern wrestling is it's overproduced. I don't care about the big stage and all that. I actually prefer if there was no stage, just give us a packed crowd like the old WWF days, and just like a big old logo, and just ship them down to the ring, and just you don't need all the pomp and circumstance and flash and fireworks and CGI crap on the screen, and it's just it's too gaudy these days.
Oh, sure. So we get all that stuff, and the opening match for this week is Sabu making his debut against Alex Wright. So this match, again, kind of the same thing as last week. This was a very fun, very fun match. You had a quick start with Sabu hitting the.
You're forgetting the intro where Eric Bischoff says that Hogan versus Luger later tonight is the match of the freaking century.
Oh yeah, Lex Luger versus Hulk Hogan.
There's no match bigger than this. It's the match of the century.
Yes, the match of the century, Hulk Hogan, Lex Luger, which, again, here's the thing. I think on paper, it is a dream match, right? Because you had Hulk Hogan, you have Lex Luger, who was going to be the next Hulk Hogan.
It's bigger than a dream match. It's the match
of the century. You're right, Shifty. The match of the century. So you got the match of the century on commentary. Again, you have Bobby Heenan and Steve McMichael bickering with one another. The match of the century, and he's going to go on about the entire night. So Sabu, Alex Wright. I thought this was a fun match. You had a quick start with Sabu hitting the springboard sidekick, and then he ends up doing a head scissors outside the ring. But then Sabu ends up hitting his basement dropkick and a tope suicida. Sabu would prop up a chair, and then he goes for his big sidekick with the chair, but he ends up hitting the steel barricade.
Crash and burn.
Oh yeah, it looked rough, especially on those steel barricades. There's no padding on those.
And the barricades was 2 feet away from the ring. I mean, they were real tight back then.
Let's see here.
The barricades.
barricades were they were just like steel like girders basically.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't remember them being that close to the ring, though. I guess because the arena was so small, they probably had to move them in.
Oh, that was probably the case, yeah. So then Wright comes back. He hits a drop kick and a body slam on the floor. But then he'd bring him back into the ring and hit a missile drop kick from the top rope, which then a massive dive to the outside. Wright would end up hitting a top rope superplex, which then Sabu would come back and hit a springboard drop kick. Alex Wright would end up missing a standing moonsault attempt, but this was very clean. He missed that standing moonsault, but turned it into a German suplex, which that looked nice. They went back to the top rope where Sabu would end up hitting a top rope Arabian press for the 3, but then Sabu would attack Alex Wright after the match and dive into him through a table, causing the ref to reverse his decision and give the victory to Alex Wright.
Yeah, Alex smacked the back of his head on the fence out there, and it kind of looked nasty. But
yeah,
I have to mention this. People today don't realize. I mean, he wasn't a huge deal, but Alex Wright was like on every single program. He was on every single syndicated show that they had, the lower syndicated shows every Saturday night. He was a fixture in WCW, and he was never like a big time part of WCW, but he was used so much that people don't give him a credit for how much of a workhorse that kid was. And he was only 20 years old back in 95.
Yeah, like from what I've seen of him, Alex Wright was very good.
Yeah, Ric Flair was trying to push him hard, but he just never really took off like some people expected him to. But I think that's because Nitro came around and you had all these bigger talents come in the cruiserweight division, and it kind of stole his thunder. But for a while there, you were thinking something might happen with him. At least getting like maybe the U.S. title or the TV title or.
Yeah, I really wish that like they did. Like, I'm not saying he was going to be world champion because like at that time but you could have gave him the U.S. title, like, because from what I've seen, he did win the cruiserweight title.
It might be because why I think that a lot of people, at least the people that I grew up with, that thought that he was special because they brought in a year during that time or just before that guys like Eric Watts and a couple other guys that were nepotism hires because Eric Watts' dad was Bill Watts, and they sucked, and they tried to push those guys. And Alex just shined above the crappy other guys they were trying to put on the roster back then. And that's like I said, he was a solid workhorse.
Right. Yeah, he really was a workhorse, and I just wish he was just given more props than what he ended up doing.
Yeah.
I gave the match overall B. It was fun, but again, the finish kind of being a screwy finish was just like but it was fun. Same thing as the Pillman Jushin Thunder Liger match. It was a fun match to kind of start off the show. Started off hot.
You don't see that many decisions like that anymore where somebody will attack somebody after the match and goes, okay, we're reversing that decision. Like, what? You can't do that. And, weird stuff.
Very, very weird. Next up is actually an in-ring promo as Mean Gene is getting ready to interview Ric Flair. Ric Flair comes out in the most Ric Flair suit ever. Ric Flair cuts a promo on Arn Anderson about he was they've been traveling up on the road together, but Arn was not on his side in South Beach, and that Arn was talking with his family in the hotel room, and that Arn and Ric Flair had a special bond, and that the Four Horsemen, the symbol wasn't necessarily about the Four Horsemen, but really just it was it was kind of like sharing the bond between him and Arn Anderson.
He screws up and he says, I was Joe Montana and Arn Anderson was Lawrence Taylor. Lawrence Taylor and Joe Montana play for different teams there, Rick. I mean, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it's very, very weird.
And then Luger comes out. He takes 2 steps out the entrance into the ring because it's literally 2 steps from the entrance to the ring. And it's weird, though. It's like one of the weirdest interview segments I've ever seen because he just steps in the ring, and then Ric Flair cuts his promo for him. And then Luger's like, you never changed, Rick. And then he leaves. Luger leaves after he comes in. What the heck?
It is a very absurd promo because literally Luger comes out and then it turns into Ric Flair being Lex Luger's hype man and saying, because this was around the time, and this is going to be Ric Flair's entire character arc throughout like the rest of WCW, is like he's obsessed with Hulk Hogan and he hates Hulk Hogan with a passion and he wants to kill him. So Flair is like, Luger is going to beat Hogan tonight for the belt. And then he's like, how he's going to kick Hogan's ass. And like, he's putting over Lex Luger. And Lex is like, you'll never. And then basically just says Luger's going to beat Hogan. And that's the end of the segment. It was just all over the place because I feel like Rick was trying to put over, the match with Arn at Fall Brawl. And then you have him like trying to kind of keep his feud with Hogan going.
I mean, why did you bring Luger out? I mean,
yeah. Because I get that, the whole feud with him and Arn is Arn Anderson is just like, dude, Rick, you're too obsessed with Hulk Hogan. You need to be focusing on other stuff. And Rick's like, no, I hate Hulk Hogan. And then that's why they're feuding. And like, I get that they're trying to push this is the biggest reason why they're the whole reason why they're feuding. But it was just a bit all over the place for my liking.
Yeah, it was weird.
Very weird. Then following this, we got the WCW United States Championship on the line of Sting defense against VK Wall Street. Not a lot of notes here. I'm just going to tell you about what I kind of saw. There's some good technical wrestling here. VK was very agile here in this match. I was very surprised. But Sting ends up hitting a couple, drop kicks. VK ends up taking control when he sends Sting out of the ring. There's a very awkward spot. I don't know if you saw the Shifty, but it's like Sting was going to slingshot himself and hit Wall Street with something, but I couldn't really tell what he ends up hitting him with, and Wall Street no sells him. So I don't know if he was supposed to counter that or if he was supposed to it just looked weird.
I didn't catch it. No, but I did. I tell you what I did notice it because. Rotunda, he had a little bit more weight to him, and of course, we never really saw him wrestle without, a business shirt. All those years as IRS, he was wearing, the singlet, and he had a bit more pounds on him. And a couple of instances in that match, he really resembled Bray Wyatt. I mean, of course, that's his father, but I was like, man, and it brought back, memories of Bray and what recently happened. So, it was. Yeah, I was just like, damn.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Bray Wyatt, man. He was, and I'm gonna kind of go on this tangent real quick. I'm not gonna sit here and say I was the biggest Bray Wyatt fan, and maybe
no, we all have problems with the character, and it's kind of being stretched out too much.
But the guy had a great mind for the business, and even that I'm willing to admit. And there were things that I will even remember 2017 when he first won the title in the Chamber. I was really really for him because after all the crap the guy went through leading up to that, I was glad the guy was finally getting his moment. And yeah, we all know what happens later down the road with that, but for the time it was such a really nice moment for him. And when the Fiend first started being a thing, I was like, oh, this is really cool because of all the segments he was doing, and again what they ended up doing with him long term. But just the stuff that he was doing, it was such cool stuff, and you're not really going to get another guy like him.
No.
That's my thing on Bray Wyatt.
Well, we said that about Jake Roberts, and Bray is kind of the modern Jake Roberts with his psychology and his passion for the business and characters.
Oh yeah.
And so you never know. There may be somebody that pops up down the road that has, same qualities as those two.
I agree. Next, so then after and I'm going to go back to the matchup here. Wall Street ends up taking control of some strikes, but then Sting ends up doing the comeback. He rams Wall Street's head into a turnbuckle 10 times, hits him with a clothesline. Sting would hit the Stinger Splash and a crossbody for a 3 and retain the title. It was okay. It was nothing to write home about. I wouldn't really say it was a bad match, but it was very short. Not a lot happens. It's just a cool down match, I think. It was all right.
You know, Val Venus, the WWE really missed the boat having a move of his called the comeback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God.
But anyway, it's something else that sucked. Sting's theme song. I hated his second theme song in WCW, the Man Called Sting that they made for that WCW Rockin' Wrestling album or whatever it was. His first theme song that it's been on all these 2K video games. This is Sting or whatever it's titled. Is much better, his original theme song, than what was played during this match.
I didn't personally hate it, but I do agree it's not like the best.
Well, the chorus is good, but the lyrics during the rest of the song is kind of
Yeah, it is a bit rough around the edges. I do agree. I mean, it's not awful.
I think you can make a whole podcast of reviewing those songs off that album because there's some real stinkers on there.
I bet. So following this, they're doing some more advertising for WCW Saturday Night. This is, of course, the week before Fall Brawl. And throughout, they're talking about how, Vader's AWOL. They don't know where he is. And, they're trying to come up.
You know who's making his debut on that episode of Saturday Night?
Oh, yeah. Disco Inferno.
Yeah.
Everyone's favorite wrestler.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. So Disco Inferno makes his debut. Renegade is taking on Max Muscle.
Renegade, there. Renegade, yes. Yes. The Ultimate Warrior ripoff. Great.
Oh, yeah. God. Well, I think he's going to have a title match on the pay-per-view where he defends the TV title. God, the Renegade. I mean, no disrespect to the guy, but, what the fuck was WCW thinking trying to pull off an Ultimate Warrior ripoff? God.
Did he ever wrestle Hogan or do anything with Hogan?
No.
He didn't even tag with him or anything?
No. Not from what I recall, no. I know he was managed by Jimmy Hart, so I guess he's associated with Hogan, but, I don't even think Hogan associated with, did anything with him after that besides for, that one War Game spot in 98 where he had to fake being the Warrior because Warrior was going to have duplicate. It's so fucking stupid, but I just the shit that WCW does just cannot cease to amaze me. I swear, God. So we're going to have Renegade and Max Muscle on Saturday night. Big Bubba is going to take on David Sullivan and Flying Brian's taking on Alex Wright. One of these matches sounds interesting. I'll give him that. God, what the fuck? Well, what a Saturday night card. I can't wait to not watch it. So following this, we get Shifty's favorite match of the night, Macho Man Randy Savage taking on Scott Norton.
It was actually a good match till the finish. At one point, Scott put them up in a military press. It was one of the best military presses I've ever seen because he just slams them down after lift them up.
Yeah.
So high. Badass.
I have a lot of notes here, but so Norton attacks Savage before he gets in the ring, hits him with a clothesline. Savage tries to come back and hits a sunset flip, but Norton ends up lifting him into this choke, this double-handed choke, and then drops him down like a sack of potatoes. Savage, comes back with a hip toss, a couple clotheslines, and then he does the axe handle off the top. But then, Savage would then go try to hit him with hits him with a clothesline, and then Norton catches him with this bear hug, which then he's selling the back afterwards because you think, oh my God, Norton broke his back.
Yeah.
The commentators are trying to make it seem oh my God, Savage is he's dead, his back is broken. He's gonna be in a wheelchair.
Savage put him over amazingly in that match.
He did. Norton attacks back and hits with this really stiff power bomb that looked. And that ring, I love the WCW ring sounds because they sound legit. Norton does like, again, talk about like really clean and smooth. Like he hits like a pair of backbreakers into a press slam. Like, oh, that looks so good.
Yep.
He then hits with like a power slam and like a shoulder tackle. At one point, like Norton like drapes Savage on the top rope and then like hits him with like a DDT, which I was like, that looks. I was like, what the hell?
Yeah, they were like, the commentators were even confused. Like, was that a DDT? He killed him. That was great.
Like, that was brutal. Very brutal. Oh my God. So then he goes up to the top rope. He goes for like this move, and then like Savage would end up carrying it to like this face buster. I'm like, oh my God, like holy shit. So then he's like striking to the corner, and then the finish happens. So,
oh Lord, this might be the worst finish I've ever seen in my life.
So the Dungeon of Doom show up because, of course, the War Games match was supposed to be Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Sting, and Vader against the Dungeon of Doom, but then Vader's AWOL, or like he didn't sign on for the match or whatever. So like the Dungeon of Doom is trying to show up and try to cost Savage the match, but then he ends up countering like the Dungeon of Doom. Like he throws like Norton into, I think it was Typhoon, and then Typhoon lands on him.
That's Earthquake. He was the Shark.
Oh, the Shark. Well, he throws him into the Shark, and then he lands on Norton, causing Savage at the big elbow drop for the 3. And then after the match, Scott Norton's arguing with the Legion with the Doom, but
yeah, it's like the Shark just falls on him. He falls on him, and he's dazed, and he's so big he's holding Norton down. He can't kick out, and Savage takes the opportunity, hits him with the elbow. That's when it. I don't know if it's the worst finish, but it's just silly, and it makes.
Yeah.
I was a big Earthquake fan, so I hated how they treated him in WCW, and at least when they brought him back to WWF, they gave him that big sumo match with Yokozuna, which was really great, and I just don't think they did a lot of the old timers, and he wasn't even that old. He looked old, but he wasn't that old. I don't know. They brought him in for quick money, and they just didn't know how to use him. That whole Dungeon of Doom shit was terrible.
It was just very goofy, and it was just like not. I will agree. The finish kind of ruins the match because like it was a very good match. Like Norton got a lot of moves in here, and he looked great.
It's really weird. I mean, they just didn't know how to pull off the campy, cheesy stuff that WWF did on a regular basis. They would try, and it would fail. White Castle of Fear, or Doom, whatever it was that Vader had against Sting. So many instances that they're trying to be out there and try to do what WWF did, and they failed. They just needed to stick to what they did well. And I don't know, too many cooks in the kitchen, and they're all trying to be like the other company.
Yeah, it didn't work. It was just too because at this time WCW didn't know if it wanted to be really silly and goofy or if they wanted to be like wrestling. Because like I get that Hogan's there and they're trying their best with this Legion of Doom or Dungeon of Doom, but it just didn't work. Like I think even history has shown the Dungeon of Doom just didn't work.
What sucks though is WCW was really freaking good, like in like 89, 90, maybe early 91, when they had all these great tag teams like the Road Warriors and Samoan SWAT team and the Steiners, and they're all going at it, and then it leads to where WCW is in 95. It's just I don't know. It's just not as good as what it was. That's what they should have concentrated on instead of trying to be like WWF. They need to see how good they're what they were doing, what was working, and they tried to fix it, and they didn't need to fix it, and they tried to be like somebody else, and they didn't know how to get the right recipe for success until like 96 came around.
Yeah, it was just a weird time. That's why like when I bring up 1995, it's just a very weird time for wrestling because of how like just badly off they were.
Yeah.
So this was basically 95 in a nutshell. Slasher, what's up, Slasher? I felt bad for Renegade after he got fired. He spun into depression and ended up killing himself.
Oh,
Yeah.
didn't know that. Dang.
Yeah, I mean, don't get like that's why I said I'm not really attacking the guy. I mean, I think the
How
guy,
if they hadn't made him an Ultimate Warrior ripoff, that he might have been, people might not have been so hard on him. It's just
yeah,
just like we're saying here, like I just said, they were trying too much to be like the other guys and rip off the other guys' tone, the other guys' characters, and they didn't need to.
right. Like it was such bizarre shit. Anyway, we get to the main event. Hulk Hogan defends the world title against Lex Luger. This is a match that has been built up all throughout the night. The match of the century.
Yeah.
Throughout. God. All right. So throughout the beginning of the match, there's a lot of test of strengths where like they're shoving each other in the corner, trying to show off like, oh, I'm stronger than you. And Hogan with a lot of nice technical wrestling here. He ends up hitting like the headlocks, the drop toe hold. Hogan hits Luger with the suplex, but then Luger no-sells the suplex. He gets a nice good back and forth here where Luger ends up hitting a suplex, but Hogan no-sells, which then Luger ends up getting sent to the outside of the ring, which gets brought back in right immediately and ends up hitting Luger with like this big back body drop. Hogan would end up hitting a corner clothesline, going for a second one. Luger ends up countering it into a power slam and ends up putting Hogan into the torture rack. And this finish is really weird and silly. Like Hogan's arm, he thinks his arm goes down 3 times, but it doesn't. And then Luger thinks he's won the belt, but then, then the ref's like, no, he didn't pass out. So then Luger tries to pin Hogan. Hogan kicks out. Of course, Hogan kicking out, meaning he's going to do the Hulk up. Hogan hits him with the punches, the big boot, the leg drop. And just when he hits the leg drop, the Dungeon of Doom comes out and ends up attacking Hogan to cause the disqualification win, which then Savage and Sting come to the aid of Hulk Hogan to get rid of the Dungeon of Doom. So then after they get rid of him, Hogan ends up shoving Luger because, the Dungeon of Doom doesn't attack him, which then leads into a big promo at the end where basically Mean Gene comes out, is like, what the hell's going on? And Hogan's like, I'm getting sick of this dude. I'm feuding with the Dungeon of Doom. Why should I be focusing on my pasta restaurant brother? And like this brother Jack dude didn't get attacked. What's the deal, dude? And then like Randy Savage is like, ooh yeah, Hogan. Luger clearly isn't on our side because he didn't get attacked. And then Sting's like, look, we need a 4th guy for War Games. Like Luger's clearly that guy. And then Savage is like,
Sting actually says something. I thought he just grabbed the mic and went, "Oh!"
Yeah, I know, crazy. He says something that goes, "Ah!" or it's silence. So Sting is like, hey, look, Luger needs to be part of War Games. Savage is like, no, because I'd rather be one man short than having to deal with somebody that I can't trust. And then you have like Sting and Savage are kind of arguing because now Savage is accusing Sting and Jimmy Hart of not being with them because they didn't get attacked. And then like throughout this is like Sting's like, please, you need to give Luger a chance. Savage is like, no. And then Hogan's like, I'm torn apart, dude. I'm torn apart, brother. I can't choose. I'm indecisive, brother. He's like, and then he just finally just like, look, Hogan's torn apart. He's just like, look, do you want to be in the War Games match? Because he's just because like at this point it's like 1 vote yes, 1 vote no. So Hogan's like, do you want to be in War Games? And then Sting throughout is like, don't embarrass me. Like, please just accept it. And then
he's like, you're tearing me apart, Luger. So Lisa, he's like, Luger,
you're tearing me apart, brother. You're tearing me apart, Luger.
Yeah, but going back to the match, you forgot that big point in the match where Bischoff's all like he's taking a shot at the WWF champion Diesel because he barely made it in the mid card here when he was back in WCW here a couple years ago.
Yeah, and what's even funnier is literally a couple years later he's main eventing Starrcade and winning the WCW World Championship. So I mean, we really won here in the end.
Exactly. I mean, they always wanted to take a shot at him.
Oh, and also, I forgot to mention this. I think this was before the Sting match where literally Eric Bischoff's like, oh, if you want to turn into, this and tune into the competition, don't, because I'll literally tell you what happens. So, Shawn Michaels beats the big guy with the super kick, and then, he makes fun of it for some reason. Which...
They did that a bunch.
Yeah, they did. because around this time, like you mentioned, they were pre-taped. So literally they would get the results in advance and they'd just be like, yeah, don't watch that. Like, we have the results for you. Watch our stuff. It's live. So after this, like, Hogan's like, look, do you want to be in War Games or not? Things like, don't embarrass me. And Luger accepts, but he only really accepts on the condition that, he ends up getting a world title match again at some point, which then Savage is backwards like, oh, of course, he's got, a motive. And then, of course, Hogan shakes Luger's big stinky hand, and then, Luger's now part of War Games. So now the team, this all-star team consists of WCW World Champion Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, WCW US Champion Sting, and Lex Luger. And they're going to take on the Dungeon of Doom inside War Games. Oh boy, I can't wait for that.
And who's on the who's on the team? The Booty Man, or excuse me, Zodiac, Shark.
Well,
Kamala.
let me look for you here. The Fall Brawl 95 team for the Dungeon of Doom was Kamala, the Zodiac, the Shark, and Meng.
No Yeti.
No Yeti yet. But there is a stipulation for the War Games match where if, Team Hogan wins and Hulk Hogan gets a chance to beat up Kevin Sullivan, the Taskmaster, for a few minutes. So I don't know. Are they going to win or not? Probably, because, who's on the team, and it's Hogan. So, of course, he's going to win. This show is fine. I mean, it wasn't anything to, like, it wasn't as good as last week's, but I think there was, again, a good amount of decent wrestling here. You have a couple of things, because this was really just the go-home show for your pay-per-view, which I thought they did. Know.
I think that Scott Norton match, except for the ending, I think that was probably my favorite match of the first two episodes.
It's up there for me. I think I like the Jushin Liger and Pillman match too.
Yeah, that was probably the best for me.
But yeah, you had a lot of great wrestling throughout these first two episodes. You had a lot of great build up for your big main event matches in Arn Anderson, Ric Flair, and Hogan, and War Games, which we're gonna talk about next week. So we got a lot of good stuff, man. I can't wait to. Yeah, man. What would you say about the first 2 weeks as a whole, Shifty? Was this a big W for you, or was this just like, or like trash?
It wasn't trash. It was fun to go back and watch. I mean, I wasn't a huge WCW guy. I was more WWF growing up, and this doesn't necessarily put me in WCW's camp, but it was fun going back and watching. Like I said, I wasn't particularly a fan of Hulk Hogan during this era. I just don't think he had the greatest image, and I think the feud with the Dungeon of Doom was cornball, and it's great seeing like the what Nitro, the startings of what Nitro is going to become with the cruiserweights, and like I said, Scott Norton arriving on the scene. But I think Hogan and those guys are holding it down right now, and not holding it down in a good way. They're holding it back.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, so that wraps up the first 2 weeks of Monday Nitro. We'll be back next week to talk about WCW Fall Brawl 95 War Games. There's a lot of matches we're going to be discussing. And then, it's just going to go from there. I believe after Fall Brawl, we have 3 more pay-per-views: Halloween Havoc, World War III, and Starrcade. So,
World War III. 3 reigns, God. 60 guys.
Yeah, 60 men.
Is that the one where Savage wins?
Yes.
Okay.
So, but we'll get to those when we get to that. It's good. So that'll basically be, we're just going to talk about, like, I'm basically going to do this in seasons. You know how shows have seasons. This is season 1, 1995, where the big boys play. So,
yes.
So
let me ask you, are we going to do Thunders too? Because that's a lot.
we are eventually going to do Thunders, but that'll be basically when we'll do when we're going to do maybe just one episode of Nitro, because right now, because the episodes are so short, we can review multiple in a row. But once they get like longer, we're going to end up probably reviewing like one. So we'll probably just add Thunder as like the extra episode. But
okay, and be prepared. Thunder had a lot of B tier material, so
I'm already preparing myself for that, to be fair.
Okay, and I may be on one of those episodes because I attended one episode of Thunder, so I don't know if I'm on it or not. So we'll see. It'll be many years down the road.
Absolutely. But with that being said, we're about at an hour and a half. I'm going to call it here. Shifty, tell everybody where they can find you at.
You can find me on Twitter. I don't advise it, but that's where you can find me.
Very cool. Very nice. Well, I'm doing stuff on my channel again, thank God. So check me out here. My roommate, Mystic Wolves, we're doing Five Nights at Freddy's. We're playing the games in lead up to the movie, so check that out. I might end up doing reviews of myself of the games pretty soon, so check those out when they eventually get made. I'm on the Hangout on Wednesdays on Guy Scar's channel. Sometimes I'm on the weekly wrap-up on Chaos Central, Han Star's channel, and Chris Knight's channel. I'm basically just everywhere. Check me out when you can. And with that being said, guys, that about does it. We'll be back next week talking about Fall Brawl. Thank you guys for watching. This is the Austinator and Shifty signing out.
Later.
Peace.
That's awesome.